In today's episode, we delve into a shocking and tragic case of jealousy and violence within a family. A jealous mom stabs her own son to death after catching him with his stepdad. This tragic story reveals the intense emotions and devastating outcomes that shattered a family. Join us as we explore the details of this chilling incident. Lucas Kovalek was an 18-year-old recent high school graduate from Delray Beach, Florida. He was well-liked in school, recognized for his looks and friendly demeanor. However, beneath his charming exterior, Lucas was grappling with profound emotional struggles. After graduation, he found himself without a clear path for the future. His grades fell short for admission to a top college, and he didn't have a stable job lined up, increasing the pressure he faced at home. His parents' troubled marriage only added to his stress. His mother, Adriana Kovalek-Menger, had once been a model in Slovakia before relocating to the U.S. and marrying a successful real estate developer. Their relationship was tumultuous, marked by heated arguments and ongoing tension. Adriana was fixated on maintaining her glamorous image, frequently investing hours in beauty treatments and surgeries. This obsession with appearance extended to Lucas, who faced immense pressure to meet her standards of perfection. Lucas' stepfather, Stephen Menger, was a successful businessman who prioritized work over family time. This left Lucas feeling trapped between his parents, striving to satisfy them but constantly feeling inadequate. To cope with the stress, he began to rely on alcohol. What began as a way to relax with friends quickly escalated into a serious problem. By February 2018, Lucas was drinking heavily nearly every day, often isolating himself in his room for hours and consuming as many as a dozen bottles of rum on his own. Lucas favored brands like Bacardi and Captain Morgan, and empty bottles often accumulated in the trash, unnoticed by his parents, who were preoccupied with their own lives. While alcohol offered him a brief escape, it intensified his feelings of isolation and confusion, especially as he wrestled with his sexuality. Around this time, he also experienced a painful breakup with his high school girlfriend, Maya Rodriguez. They had been together for 2 years, but their relationship ended in early 2018, leaving Lucas devastated. Friends noted that he was heartbroken and uncertain about how to move on. He distanced himself from his usual friends and became increasingly withdrawn, spending more time alone in his room. His drinking worsened, leading him to miss family events and abandon his regular workouts at the local Planet Fitness. Despite his struggles, Lucas attempted to present a facade of having everything under control, though those close to him sensed something was off. On the morning of February 24, 2018, Lucas Kovalek's lifeless body was found on the floor of his bedroom in Delray Beach, Florida. It was his stepfather, Stephen Menger, who made the grim discovery. Concerned that Lucas's silver Honda Civic was still parked in the driveway well past noon, he went to check on him. Lucas had not replied to any calls or texts, which was unusual, even considering his recent withdrawal. When Stephen entered the room, he found Lucas covered in blood, stabbed 63 times. The room itself was in disarray, with signs of struggle evident on the bed and floor. Lucas's shirtless body was sprawled near his desk, where an overturned bottle of rum and a laptop still playing YouTube true crime documentaries provided a chilling backdrop. Lucas had been drinking heavily before his death, evident from the half-empty Bacardi bottles scattered throughout the room. Stephen quickly called 911, his voice shaky yet composed. Paramedics arrived swiftly, followed by officers from the Delray Beach Police Department. At first, some considered the possibility of suicide, given Lucas's emotional struggles and heavy drinking. However, as the officers examined the scene, the severity of the wounds and the absence of any defensive injuries indicated a different story. The stabbing was brutal, but was it far too intense to be self-inflicted? Blood was splattered on the walls and furniture, and Lucas's phone, lying just a few feet away from his body, had been smashed in the chaos. Investigators soon wondered whether they were dealing with a homicide, and the quiet Delray Beach neighborhood, shaken by the news, would never be the same when the Delray Beach Police Department arrived at the scene of Lucas Kovalek's death. The severity of the situation became immediately clear. Lucas's body was found lying on the floor of his bedroom, with 63 stab wounds covering his chest, arms, and neck. The brutality of the attack was undeniable. However, because Lucas had a known history of self-destructive behavior, particularly during his alcohol binges, officers initially considered the possibility of suicide. Lucas had been drinking heavily, as evidenced by the empty bottles of Bacardi in the room, and his emotional state in the weeks leading up to his death was fragile due to his recent breakup and his parents' tumultuous marriage. The position of Lucas's body, slumped near his desk, along with the blood-soaked surroundings, initially led detectives to consider the possibility of a violent, alcohol-fueled suicide. Given his recent behavior isolating himself, drinking heavily, and distancing himself from friends and family, it seemed plausible. The police initially thought Lucas might have fallen into a dangerous state of mind, leading to a tragic end. However, as detectives investigated further, they uncovered several inconsistencies. The angle of the stab wounds did not align with what one would expect from a self-inflicted act. Many of the wounds were located on Lucas's back and shoulders, areas that would be hard to reach in a suicide scenario. Furthermore, there were no defensive marks on his hands or arms, which would usually indicate a struggle, raising doubts about how he could have inflicted such severe injuries without any signs of resistance. Forensic investigators employed techniques like blood spatter analysis and conducted a thorough autopsy to analyze the scene in greater detail. The blood patterns on the walls and floor indicated that the attack likely occurred while Lucas was lying on the ground, rather than standing or moving, which would align with a struggle or a suicide attempt. Additionally, the absence of hesitation wounds typically found in self-inflicted stabbings further suggested foul play. As the evidence accumulated, the police shifted their investigation from a suspected suicide to a homicide. This development stunned the community, implying that someone close to Lucas may have been responsible for the violent act. Detectives recognized the urgency to identify who had brutally taken the young man's life. Lucas's 41-year-old mother, Adriana Kowalik-Minder, quickly became the police's primary person of interest. Adriana was known for her beauty and glamorous lifestyle, obsessively focused on maintaining her youthful appearance. In the years before her son's death, she spent a significant amount on plastic surgeries, Botox, facelifts, and body contouring procedures. Her fixation on looking young wasn't just a personal concern, she also imposed these standards on her family. Lucas often became a target for Adriana's frustrations when he failed to meet her unrealistic expectations. She criticized everything from his weight to his friends, and her harsh comments left him feeling inadequate and under constant pressure. While their relationship had always been strained, it deteriorated further as Lucas grew older. Her verbal outbursts became more frequent, often escalating to physical confrontations. She would lash out at Lucas when he didn't comply with her expectations, sometimes kicking, slapping, even beating him during arguments. Neighbors reported hearing shouting matches between the two, especially in the months leading up to his death. Her anger was frequently exacerbated by alcohol. Adriana was a heavy drinker, and when she was under the influence, her temper became even more unpredictable. During these drunken episodes, she would berate Lucas for not embodying the polished, perfect image she wanted to present to the world. When police brought Adriana in for questioning, she appeared emotional but not entirely surprised by her son's death. Despite their troubled relationship, she quickly shifted blame to her husband, Stephen Menger, alleging that he must be responsible. However, she provided no concrete evidence for her accusation, only expressing her anger towards Stephen over their failing marriage. Her frustration appeared to stem more from their marital problems than from her son's death. She claimed that Stephen had become distant, and her bitterness prompted her to implicate him without hesitation. During her interrogation, Adriana fluctuated between crying and deflecting blame. At times she was calm, but she became defensive when questioned about her actions and her relationship with Lucas. Despite her accusations, the police found her behavior suspicious. Her history of abusive outbursts, particularly when drinking, along with her need for control over her family, positioned her as a strong suspect. Without direct evidence, investigators continued to explore other leads while closely monitoring Adriana's potential involvement in her son's murder. Maya Rodriguez, Lucas's ex-girlfriend, emerged as another key suspect in the case. At 19, Maya was known for her quiet, studious nature, often spending hours with her textbooks or volunteering at the local library. Outwardly, Maya seemed like the ideal student, hardworking, responsible, and focused on her future. However, beneath this polished facade, she harbored deep resentment toward Lucas, and her actions in the days leading up to his death revealed a much darker side. Although they had dated throughout high school, their relationship began to deteriorate shortly after graduation. Maya couldn't handle Lucas' increasing dependence on alcohol. During his drinking binges, Lucas would sometimes wick himself in anger, a form of self-punishment that deeply disturbed Maya. His erratic behavior and emotional instability became too much for her, and she ultimately ended the relationship, hoping it would be a wake-up call for Lucas to seek help. Rather than moving on, Lucas sank further into his self-destructive habits. After his death, police discovered a series of messages Maya had sent him in the days leading up to the murder. Despite her calm academic facade, these messages were filled with anger and hostility. She berated Lucas for his perceived failures and mocked his insecurities. The messages took a sexually explicit turn, with Maya sending him photos of herself with other men, taunting him about her new relationships and his shortcomings as a lover. The cruelty in these messages indicated that Maya was still profoundly affected by the breakup and may have sought revenge on Lucas for the pain he had caused her during their time together. While the tone of her messages was troubling, police found no direct evidence linking Maya to the crime scene. During her interrogation, she was cooperative, answering questions calmly but with a cold detachment that unsettled investigators. She claimed her actions stemmed from frustration with Lucas's inability to get his life on track. Maya denied any involvement in Lucas's death and claimed to have moved on emotionally, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. Her troubling behavior made her a secondary suspect. However, investigators were not convinced she could be capable of such a brutal crime. Her apparent emotional manipulation of Lucas in the days leading up to his murder raised concerns, but it wasn't enough to solidify her as the primary suspect. Nonetheless, Maya's relationship with Lucas added another layer to the complex dynamics surrounding his tragic death. The investigation took a startling turn when police uncovered the real reason behind Adriana Kowalik-Menger's increasing resentment toward her son. On a chilly evening in February 2018, while delving into the tense family dynamics, detectives stumbled upon a carefully concealed secret. Adriana had walked in on her son Lucas and her husband, Stephen Menger, having sex together on the living room couch. This discovery completely shifted the case. Adriana, who was already deeply insecure about aging and obsessed with maintaining her appearance, had always struggled with the idea of losing control over her family. Discovering her 18-year-old son with her 46-year-old husband was more than a betrayal for Adriana. It struck a devastating blow to her fragile ego and the carefully maintained facade of her seemingly perfect life. Stephen, a wealthy and charming real estate developer, had been married to Adriana since Lucas was a child, and she viewed him as the ultimate provider and protector of their family. However, this affair exposed a troubling undercurrent that had been undermining her mental stability for months. When Adriana discovered Lucas and Stephen together, it shattered the illusion of control she had clung to. The realization that her husband, whom she had long suspected of infidelity, was involved with her own son plunged her into a deep downward spiral. Police discovered that Adriana hadn't confronted them right away. Instead, she allowed the secret to fester, creating a toxic mix of humiliation, anger, and jealousy. In the days after her discovery, Adriana became increasingly erratic, her drinking escalated, and her verbal outbursts intensified. This new information provided investigators with a critical motive for her potential involvement in Lucas's death. Adriana was already neurotic about aging, having spent thousands on cosmetic procedures to maintain her husband's attention, and now she felt utterly humiliated. For her, the affair between Lucas and Stephen was not just about sex, it represented the ultimate betrayal by the two men she loved most. As police detectives pieced together the timeline leading up to the murder, they realized that Adriana's discovery of this twisted relationship had reframed the investigation. It also raised new questions about the toxic dynamics within the family. Stephen Menger, 46, was seen in the community as a devoted family man. To outsiders, he seemed like a caring husband and a loving father figure to Lucas. Successful in real estate, he often presented a charming and confident image at local charity events and community gatherings. But behind closed doors, Stephen's relationship with Lucas was far more sinister and sexual than anyone could have imagined. As police investigated further into the family's dark secrets, they uncovered a disturbing truth: Stephen had been exploiting Lucas's emotional vulnerabilities for some time. Lucas had always been a sensitive young man, struggling with the fallout from his parents' turbulent marriage and his confused sexuality. Stephen used this confusion and emotional instability to manipulate Lucas, gradually grooming him into a sexual relationship after he turned legal. What started as seemingly fatherly concern and support soon spiraled into something far more destructive. Stephen skillfully managed his secret sexual relationship to keep it away from Adriana and everyone else. He took advantage of Lucas's isolation and issues with alcohol, often offering him Bacardi in return for sexual favors. Lucas, torn between wanting love and facing his own struggles, became stuck in a harmful cycle of manipulation. As their affair progressed, Stephen's attempts to hide it grew increasingly complex. He insisted that their public interactions seemed purely friendly, traveled far to dispose of any evidence, and pressured Lucas to maintain their secret, exploiting the teen's fears of rejection and embarrassment. However, in early February 2018, Stephen's grip on the situation started to slip when Adriana unexpectedly discovered them in a compromising situation. The discovery in the family living room intensified the already fraught dynamics of the household. Adriana was overwhelmed with anger, jealousy, and humiliation as her suspicions of infidelity were brutally confirmed. Stephen's efforts to conceal the affair collapsed, and the tension among the three of them escalated to a breaking point. The police investigation later uncovered how Stephen had taken advantage of Lucas's emotional struggles, leading to increasingly erratic behavior within the household. Given Adriana's already fragile mental state, this revelation only intensified the turmoil, paving the way for the tragic events that ensued. The toxic family dynamics, filled with secrets and betrayal, ultimately led to Lucas's tragic death. Upon discovering the shocking truth about the sexual relationship between her husband, Stephen Menger, and her son, Lucas, Adriana Menger's world completely unraveled. The betrayal was more than she could bear. For years, Adriana had battled her insecurities, investing heavily in plastic surgeries and obsessive beauty regimens to maintain her youth, clinging to a fragile sense of self-worth. However, this affair exposed a troubling undercurrent that had been undermining her mental stability for months. When Adriana discovered Lucas and Stephen together, it shattered the illusion of control she had clung to. The realization that her husband, whom she had long suspected of infidelity, was involved with her own son plunged her into a deep downward spiral. Police discovered that Adriana hadn't confronted them right away. Instead, she allowed the secret to fester, creating a toxic mix of humiliation, anger, and jealousy. In the days after her discovery, Adriana became increasingly erratic, her drinking escalated, and her verbal outbursts intensified. This new information provided investigators with a critical motive for her potential involvement in Lucas's death. Unable to contain her rage, Adriana attacked. Lucas, already in a vulnerable state after his most recent binge, was no match for his mother's violent outburst. She grabbed a knife and began stabbing him repeatedly. The sheer ferocity of the attack reflected the depth of her emotional devastation. By the time she was done, Lucas had been stabbed 63 times, his body lying lifeless on the floor. Adriana's anger wasn't just directed at Lucas's involvement in the affair. Her rage was fueled by her own sense of failure. In her mind, she had lost control of her family, her marriage, and her son. In her distorted thinking, killing Lucas felt like a way to regain that control, even though it ultimately shattered everything. Police later reconstructed the horrifying events, connecting the brutal attack to the emotional turmoil that had been building in Adriana for years. What initially seemed like a tragic act of self-destruction was revealed to be the outcome of a mother's overwhelming rage, fueled by jealousy, betrayal, and the disintegration of her carefully crafted life. In December 2019, Adriana Menger's trial began, drawing significant attention from the community. The courtroom was charged with a range of emotions as family, friends, and spectators came to witness the trial. Prosecutor John Bragg, a seasoned 50-year-old known for his straightforward style, laid out the case against Adriana. He argued that her actions were not only violent but also premeditated. Bragg highlighted the years of emotional instability in Adriana's life, including her jealousy over her husband's affair with Lucas. He portrayed her as a mother pushed to the brink by betrayal, stressing the calculated nature of the crime. In contrast, Adriana's defense attorney, Gloria Chan, a promising 35-year-old, sought to redirect the trial's focus. Chan contended that Adriana was a victim of her circumstances, a wife deeply wounded, and a mother pushed to her limits. She aimed to elicit sympathy for Adriana, arguing that the pressures of family life and her husband's infidelity had driven her to this point. The defense presented evidence of Adriana's struggles, including her issues with aging and her obsessive need for validation, which frequently led to explosive outbursts. However, the jury remained skeptical. As the trial unfolded, they began to see beyond the defense's depiction of Adriana as a tragic figure. The evidence presented, especially the brutal nature of Lucas's death and the extent of Adriana's emotional struggles, revealed a much darker reality. The prosecution effectively argued that Adriana's rage was not a fleeting moment of weakness, but the result of years of resentment and emotional turmoil. On the day the verdict was read, the courtroom was filled with tension. Adriana sat silently, her expression unreadable, as the jury delivered their decision. Adriana was found guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence that followed was life in prison without the possibility of parole, reflecting the seriousness of her actions. For Lucas's family, the sentencing offered some closure, but the emotional impact of the trial was clearly evident. They were visibly torn, struggling with the loss of Lucas and the shocking revelations about their family dynamics. Throughout the trial, Stephen, Lucas's stepfather, largely stayed out of the spotlight. While his presence cast a long shadow over the proceedings, he opted to remain out of public view, likely overwhelmed by the chaos that had engulfed their lives. While the sentencing concluded the legal battles, the family remained devastated, grappling with the tragic events that had transpired. In the years after the trial, Adriana, Maya, and Stephen Menger took markedly different paths, all shaped by the trauma of Lucas's death. Adriana, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole, confronted the consequences of her actions from behind bars. Adriana was sent to the Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida, a facility for female inmates. Inside, she struggled to adjust to her new reality. The isolation and the weight of her guilt felt like overwhelming burdens to bear.